Today, I'm bringing you the news that we have the New York Times polling agreeing with Rasmussen, one of the biggest Republican slanted polls that you can really mention. I mean, this is huge news. The agreement here is actually mathematically very unlikely. To have a bias on one end and then another bias and end up agreeing, it's really a horseshoe theory. But as you can see here in the national polling, you see that Kamala Harris is down in this 2024 election relative to where she was in my last upload. If you recall, she was at like 1.8, 1.9. Now she's down to 1.4. That's a half point difference. Now, again, she's still in the lead popular vote wise, but you want to be in a better position than was Biden in 2020, who barely won, Hillary Clinton in 2016, who actually lost. And so you need to be better off than them. And so, yeah, she's in the positive by 1.4, but she really need to be looking at like 3 to 4 insofar as a margin. In fact, you look at the relational causality of what the polling means in this part of the race. Look at September 8th, Biden up by over 7, Clinton up by over 2.8 percentage points. So you need to be better than them if they both didn't win convincingly. Harris is at half the Clinton margin from 8 years ago to the day. Not great, but let's actually break it down. We have literal crosstabs. We have all the mathematics that are going behind why the New York Times actually has Trump winning, which is really rare to see. Why? Look where the New York Times was in the last election cycle. All right. So they had Biden winning on November 3rd, 2020, right before the voting started. In the booths, the people stormed in, and guess what happened? They had Biden up by 8.4. Okay. Think about that. They were off by about 4 percentage points, a huge miscalculation on their end, right? So they were off by a ton. In fact, when you look at the polling, the most recent stuff, as of 4 years ago, you'll notice the margins were not favorable, to say the least. Like if you look at this, Biden up by 9, Biden up by 8, Biden up by 13 over Trump. So the New York Times has historically been a god-awful pollster when it comes to that. But apparently they're becoming more in line with reality. And I want to explore that. So what are the nitty-gritty details as to why the New York Times has Trump winning this election against Kamala? So the first thing we're going to address is going to do with the track of the country and the trajectory they're in, okay? So what do people think is going to happen in the next several months? Whether America is getting better economically, on any bevy of issues, alarmism over World War III, and everything else. So at this buffet table, we're asking a simple question of, is it on the right track or the wrong direction, really? The likely electorate has 60% of voters saying that they think that America is going in a negative direction versus only 30 saying that it is going in a right direction. What that really means for you guys is that only 3/5 of Kamala voters even think we're in the right direction. So it's kind of odd. It's to say, okay, Kamala's going to like change things, at least to 2/5 of her voter base. She's going to change things, but also not rock the boat with the Biden people somehow. It's a very difficult sort of facade that she's carrying. And so it's seemingly going to crack given these polling attributes. Here we have another gigantic number, folks. Insofar as we are concerning ourselves with the respondents that said that the track of the country is negative, they're asked a further question, which is brilliant. So you got to give the New York Times credit for this one. All right. So if you're saying it's a wrong direction that we're heading in as a nation, well, how optimistic are you that we could turn it around within the next decade? Well, look at this. The net optimism is really at 71%, whereas the net pessimistic outlook in the next 10 years is only 21%. Now, this is key for two reasons. First, the layperson would say, oh, well, people are optimistic about America. That's great. I don't even care about that. We're talking about the election here. We're talking about today, not tomorrow. Okay, when it comes down to November 5th, the notion that most people that think the country's in a bad place right now and them believing that it'll actually get better within the next several years really implies that they believe that some other candidate, not Kamala, clearly not Biden, Donald Trump, namely, can actually take the country back into a place that was much better. Now, think about this. Donald Trump's whole pitch was that, remember 5 years ago, things were so good before the lockdowns and everything. We could get that back. We can reverse the inflation, whatever else. And it seems like 71% of people are actually open to that message, which is good. Because if you had the countervailing argument, you could honestly say like, oh, yeah, things suck now, but they won't change. In which case, if Trump says, I will change it, they're just going to cynically not even vote. Maybe not vote for Kamala, but also just say, okay, well, you're not going to fix it. But it seems like people are open to a change, and the change is clearly with the oppositional candidate, the guy who's not in the Naval Observatory, and that's Trump. Definitely not Harris. And to get right to the brass tacks, guys, we are at the final question that is super, super, super interesting. Okay. Now, if you had to vote in 2024 today of the likely electorate, so 1,700 people polled, would you vote for Kamala Harris? 47%. Donald Trump, 48%. He's up by one. Okay. Don't know / refuse to answer was 5%. Now, undecideds are breaking for Trump. Why? Because, again, track of the country. We have about 2 months in the election. Over 2/3 of voters think that we're in the wrong direction. So you add 2 more months of the wrong direction happening. And guess what happens? The incumbent administration, or the person repping it, really is going to be atrophying in support, because the institutions that they're so positing to be running effectively are viewed as going in a negative place. And so for that reason, it's pretty clear that as time goes on, things will get worse for Kamala just on that basis, not even discussing the debate on Tuesday, which is exciting. But nevertheless, it basically means that the economy is either going to get worse, there's going to be another war. People in general are just not looking forward to this September early on to November. Things are not being seen as getting better. And so really, this undecided vote will break for Trump. I'm just telling you now. All right, here's another thing I wanted to talk about. There's a multi-candidate sample in this poll, which is also great to have. Back in the day, back in the good old days, when RFK was polling at like 15, 20%, you could have said, oh God, we need the RFK polls. Now it's more so like, what are Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, and Cornel West, the third party socialist candidate, doing to the ballot? And as you can see here, when you poll everybody, Kamala Harris is at 45% of the vote share. Donald Trump is at a plurality of 47%, which is a 2-point defeating of Kamala in the popular vote, versus when it was a 1v1, it was only a 1% difference. So again, double points, huge difference at the presidential level. Now, keep in mind, Jill Stein gets about 1% of the vote. Now, Jill Stein is definitely her coalition, is comprised of, I would say, maybe 50% people that wouldn't have voted anyway. And then the other 50% are broken down further onto like 90% otherwise Democrats. Okay, so these are only far leftist people voting Green Party. Now, Cornel West, similar story, the Dalisto edition. He's polling at less than 0.5%. So, I mean, that's a little crumb. But I mean, when we're talking about such small margins, yes, he is hurting Kamala a little. Now, Chase Oliver is taking 2% of the vote. Libertarians have not been this irrelevant since maybe 2012. Okay, so it's just, it doesn't really matter. Now, here's an important indication, by the way. When you look at the people who didn't know who they were going to vote for in a 1v1, you saw that Trump was actually, the amount of people that said they weren't going to vote or wouldn't tell you out of these two, it was 5%. Whereas when you remove the dichotomy and you add these leftist candidates, the 5% turns into a 3. Think about that. So all of a sudden, folks, you can see that I told you the undecideds will break for Trump, because that 2% difference is explained by them going to the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, these parties that are generally going to hurt Kamala, especially now that RFK endorsed Trump. So really, this is awesome news, because what it means is that Donald Trump in this poll for New York Times has Kamala losing to him by over 2 percentage points, and there's only 3% of the pot left. And so unless Kamala gets like 70% of the remaining vote, which is a virtual impossibility in general electoral politics, then Trump is guaranteed to win if the election were held today, according to the New York Times. Liberals. All right, let's get into some 2020 data points. If you look at this, Donald Trump and Joe Biden went against each other 4 years ago, but this question gets to a really big issue. So who did you vote for in the 2020 election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, or did you just not even vote? Now, this is interesting, right? As you can see here, 41% say they voted for Trump, 44% said they voted for Biden, 12% said they didn't even vote at all, 3% somebody else, and 1% refused. So interestingly enough, in this poll where Trump is winning by 1 or 2 percentage points by the New York Times, they actually had Biden winning by 3. What does that mean? Basically, a net 3% more people who answered the poll in the first place voted for Biden, aka the Democratic Party, last election than they did Trump back then, and they still have Trump winning regardless. So when you put in that handicap, all of a sudden it's like Trump's winning by 4 or 5. Now, it's not actually going to play out that way, but the point is that it shows mathematically that Donald Trump is getting those people that voted for him in 2016. He lost to Biden in 2020, and he's getting them back now into the coalition, if that makes sense. So this perfectly mathematically comports with my logic. And so, I mean, leave a like if that made sense. All right, 10 minutes in. Like the video if you've gotten this far. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We have more of this coming through the pike in the next 2 months. All right, so rapid fire. We have the disapproval rating of Joe Biden at a negative 17%. We have a disapproval rating of Donald Trump of negative 6%. We have a negative disapproval rating of Kamala Harris of negative 5%. Why is this interesting? Well, actually, Biden, apparently, according to the media, his disapproval is now down to negative 12 instead of negative 17. So New York Times disagrees, and I tend to favor that prognosis than for him to all of a sudden salvage his popularity for no reason. But also, Donald Trump at a negative 6 is great because if you look at the polling, he's generally down by negative 10, and so this is a good look. But even Kamala at a negative 5 is pretty good for Republicans because the general polling has her as like a net neutral and disfavorability, which is an asinine proposition given the cackles and the talking and the fakeabonics and everything that's so quirky and annoying, really. But that personality is warding off people in the electorate. So again, more people dislike her than like, and that's perfect. Again, in 2020, Biden was liked as a net positive of 6, whereas Harris is at a negative of 5. And Trump, yes, unpopular in 2020 and 24 on the net, but I mean, when you make the other person unpopular, you become a Hillary Clinton or what? A loser. There you go. Another rapid fire section, okay? Do you feel like you need to learn more about Trump? About 9% say they do. 90% say they've already heard what they need to know. From Kamala Harris, though, different story. Do you want to know more about Kamala? 71% say yes. 28% of people say they do need to know more, whereas 71% say that they already know enough. Why do I say this? Well, basically what that proves is that there's triple the amount of intrigue into what Kamala has policy-wise and everything in between, personality quirks and everything, versus Trump. So what does that mean? Trump is somebody who's not going to be volatile in the polls going forward, whereas Kamala could screw the pooch with that 28% that want to learn more. Maybe they're asking, okay, well, she hasn't earned my vote yet, so she could totally fumble whatever remaining support there's out there in the ether, so to speak. A complete snake bite for the Kamala campaign. You see this? So what do you need to learn more about Donald Trump? 45% policies, okay, over character and everything else, right? It's policies at 45. But what's Kamala at? Policies, 66%. So there's a lot more intrigue and fascination over the policies of Kamala over Trump. Why do I mention this? Because if the economy is bad, if the border is bad, people are questioning, okay, what the hell are you going to do to fix it? And Kamala has not come up with them yet. She doesn't have policies on her website last time I checked. And so at that point, you're really asking yourself as a voter, okay, what are the plans, bro? And so this is going to be a worse and worse polling issue as time goes on because, you know, you become the candidate. You might get like 2 weeks. Maybe you get a past due credit by your teacher. Okay, like turn it in. Where are the policies, Kamala? And she's about to fail the class. I mean, the exam is on November 5th. And frankly, I mean, you're supposed to have this done by months in advance. And the policies are not on the website. So, I mean, this is definitely going to be lethal if not fixed. Look, I thought I was going to end the video. I'm nerding out way too much. Sorry. Look, do you think Kamala Harris represents real change or more of the same? 25% say major change. 15% say minor change. 55% say more of the same. Guys, the current administration has an approval rating of negative 17%. You want most people to say more of the same? Are you freaking kidding me? Look, mind you, if you were, Ronald Reagan 1984, you want more of the same. Yes, of course, that's cool. But if it's Biden Harris 24, you want to change the game up, dude. What was Obama change? You wouldn't want to say more of Bush. What? So it's crazy. Now, look at this. Look at this. Donald Trump, 53% say major change coming. 8% say minor change. 34% say more of the same. So you can see how people generally don't like the track of the country, generally don't approve of Joe Biden's job as president, and they see Trump as a major change candidate. What does that show you guys? Well, it looks like 2016 all over again. The change candidate. Think about that. And not only is he a change candidate, but it's somebody who was already president. So you already know the economy was golden back then. You already know he was winning the trade wars back then. You already know there was no wars in his presidency. So, I mean, this is like you get the cake and eat it too. It's like getting back with your ex-girlfriend. It's hot. I mean, this is lit. This is great stuff for Trump. I mean, a manic, but look at this by the New York Times. It's a beautiful, I'd say Christmas present, but it's September and it's boiling outside, but you get the vibes, guys. Who's likely going to handle the economy better? Trump by 13%, 55 to 42. Wow. Abortion, Kamala up by 15. But again, economy is more important. Immigration, Trump is winning by 10. Democracy, Trump is only losing by 5. Again, that is after the whole Capitol protest and everything like that. Imagine being down by only 5 after that big fiasco. I mean, that's not great, dude. Anyway, when it comes to the rating of the economy, 23% say it's excellent / good, not great. Also, net fair / poor ratings are at a 76th percentile. What that means is that 3 out of 4 contestants really would say that the economy is either bad or meh, which is not a winning condition at all. All right, with everything covered, you got the message. The New York Times, which is historically, like you saw in 2020, super far left when it comes to bias, is maybe coming to their senses. What the hell? And I mean, the Rasmussen bros and the people that were saying that Trump was winning the whole time like me are totally vindicated, and you love to see it. So anyway, like the video if you haven't liked it yet, and subscribe if you've yet to do so. Punch that like button, baby. Let's go. See ya. Bye. Adios, actually. Bye.